Blackhawks fans, welcome into the Four Feathers podcast. We are back from break. Johnny Nani alongside Tony Marchese coming to you for a little Thursday happy hour action. Tony, how you doing to start the weekend?
Johnny, it's good to be back. We survived the no hockey for a little over a week there.
10 days. 10 days.
Yeah,
with the
it was.
Hawks.
It felt like 84 years, but it was only 10 days, and
Good to
it
guess.
was
Yeah.
it was a well needed break, man. I'm not gonna lie, well needed break from this Blackhawks hockey team. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, right. I feel like that's a good way to describe it. Just especially when you saw what happened last night, and we're going to talk about that and a bunch of other things. I will say I missed hockey for the most part because there was that kind of span. You had the All-Star break, but like we talked about in our last episode, that was kind of background noise for me. It's even skills competition, the game itself, whatever. The draft on that Thursday. That's all fine and dandy. I was just glad that regular action was back on Monday night, even though there were only a couple games per night. But that was good leading up into the Hawks being back last night. So we're going to talk about that return to action. The news is now hashtag confirmed. You may have read about it over at ontapsportsnet.com. Winter Classic, we'll discuss that as well. Connor Bedard, how he's progressing. Other injury updates, because Blackhawks are always known to have a novel of an injury report. We'll ruffle some feathers, do a little salt shaker, our usual segments towards the end, and give you a look at what's on tap next. With that in mind, go over to ontapsportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports literature and podcasting needs. Subscribe on YouTube and on Facebook there. That's how you can join the conversation. We can also see your comments on X, so make sure you're following us on the socials at Four Feathers Pod at OnTap Sportsnet. Tony, let's dive in and start with the return to action. Like I mentioned, a little 10-day break with the All-Star break, and then the other, kind of mandated NHLPA break in there as well. So that put the Hawks starting off a home-heavy February with the Minnesota Wild in town last night. Unfortunately, it was more of the same with the scoring woes continuing.
Yeah, just not much offense again. I did the first period, man. I think they only mustered 2 shots on goal. Was it one? Wow, it was one. You're on mute. Well, Johnny's on mute there. I don't know if he can hear me, but Johnny was on mute. You back?
One goddamn shot.
Yeah,
that's all we got.
Yeah, man, it was not pleasant. The fact that they were able to score one goal was pleasant, Johnny. But again, we talked about this before the break. No Connor Bedard, no offense. And that's the same thing that we saw yesterday.
Right. And it's the other injuries, too, that we'll talk about in a little bit here. But a few, notable events that happened in this game. we talked through the one shot, the first period. Foligno scoring the lone goal. That was a pretty play by Kershaw, even if he wasn't run exactly how he had intended it. It still ended up being a pretty nice highlight reel goal, and that was cool to see Nick score before his brother. And unfortunately, it was Marcus Foligno who had a couple of the other notable events in this game. A fight. I'll let you break that one down, but then Marcus did end up scoring the deciding goal in this game. But hey, a little bit of chippiness here, and it was in the middle frame with Jared Tenorti and Marcus Foligno dropping the gloves. That's a heavyweight bout right there.
It was a heavyweight bout, Johnny. And again, the fights, Jared Tenorti, he's been probably the most highlight reel-esque player on this team outside of Connor Bedard for the fights alone. I loved this bout. This was his second old school bout of the season. We were at one of them, myself and Ron had a perfect viewpoint. I know you were able to capture some video that we got in the stadium and get it out over on the Four Feathers podcast account on Twitter over there. But this one, Johnny, was fantastic. Marcus Foligno checks Jared Tenorti into the boards in the corner. The play had sort of went back the other way a little bit, so you didn't really get a good grasp, at least from the TNT broadcast, of what was transpiring or who was sort of jarring at each other. I wasn't a huge fan of a lot of the TNT broadcast stuff that took place last night. They also snubbed Jim Corneliuson on the anthem. I take exception to when they do that. But either way, Tenorti got back up, sort of jarred with Foligno a little bit. And then you saw these two heavyweights just sort of square each other up for what felt like at least a minute and 30-second round. Multiple times refs were waved off and let the big boys go at it. There was some blood drawn. It looks like Foligno cut up his hand a little bit, maybe caught the ear flap of the helmet on Jared Tenorti, cut his ear up a little bit. So there's some really cool and tough hockey photos that came out of this bout, but the haymakers that were thrown in this showdown, Johnny, were pretty much the story of the game for me in terms of Blackhawks highlights. It was interesting also to see Nick Foligno sort of sitting there on the bench, like, Jesus Christ, what's going on? It's its brother in one corner, and you've got the Blackhawks enforcer Jared Tenorti on the other end. I was sitting there wondering to myself before the game started. I was like, I wonder if these two have ever fought each other. It'd be kind of funny to watch. But then Jared Tenorti steps up in Nick Foligno's spot there and goes and handles Marcus Foligno. I didn't really declare Jared Tenorti a winner in this one, Johnny. It sort of felt like this one goes to a judge's decision, sort of a split decision bout. But Jared Tenorti's undefeated in fights this season.
I feel like this is one that's probably fairly split. If you go and look at the hockeyfights.com rating, when they have people go on and, judge who won the fight there, some of them can be lopsided and they're obvious, which guy won the fight, who drops them at the end, and who's gassed and whatnot. I feel like Marcus Foligno will probably get a little bit of an edge in this voting just because of the blood drawn to Tenorti's ear, because hands cut up in fights, that's pretty common, especially with guys not being allowed to take their helmets off before they go at it like they used to. So that's kind of what I view it as. But in your mind, as Hawks fans here, for our pride, we're going to maintain that Jared Tenorti is undefeated in fights.
I've got some questions. Yeah, I've got some questions for you on that, though, Johnny. Like in terms of the not being allowed to take your helmets off, I understand the concussionary reasons behind this, but does it change the dynamic of these fights for you in your mind versus good old fashioned, dropping the helmets, dropping the gloves?
Right. I mean, you saw definitely more shots connect right to the head, but then that's also part of what leads to those concussion issues in CTE, which is such a big, issue that people have with contact sports in general, not just hockey, right? So I feel like you just got to be more strategic with where you land. You uppercuts, way better. You're getting a chin. There's nothing there unless the guy's wearing a bubble, and if you're wearing a bubble, you're not fighting. So, it does change things. You're right, but overall, I mean, it's probably better for the guys long term, health wise. I'm
just wondering if the blood draw was actually due to part of the helmet clipping the ear on that one land that cut both of them at the same time there. So you've seen some hand injuries. Foligno himself, Nick, the Nick version of the Folignos, he busted his hand up in a fight. Most likely connecting with the helmet there. Just a few weeks ago that kept him out of the lineup for a little while. So I've been thinking about that with the helmets in the fights. I mean, you're punching some plastic and all that stuff right there. It's not pleasant, but we're protecting the player's head. I get it totally, but we've seen some hand injuries go down now as a repercussion of that.
Yeah, right. You talked about a couple of the sort of like meme-worthy sort of moments, and that's what we got to pull away from these. And we only have one goal highlight and maybe a couple of Peter Mrazek saves to talk about in a game like this. We got to take what we can from these like viral moments. So I love the video of Nick Foligno being zoomed in on, watching his brother fight with his teammate Jared Tenorti. That's a good reaction one. And then also the one with Tenorti's ear bleeding. I shared it out from Four Feathers earlier. It's when you listen to a Chris Foster's call, right? Like, he wasn't on the call last night, but that is now the meme that I will use for that whenever I hear "and a score" in the future, Tony.
I was upset that we didn't get Chris Foster's last night. I texted you on my way home from the city last night, said, I can't wait to hear. I hope I hear "and a score" 3 times tonight. Obviously, that wouldn't have even been the case. Blackhawks only with that goal, but it was the TNT broadcast. I thought it was okay, but there were some things that I missed from the NBC broadcast.
Well,
when we go out to TNT,
I had John and Troy on per usual. That's my setup.
Your creature had it.
Yeah, I pull up that's the audio. From visual standpoint, I don't know. It is what it is. I know what to expect from TNT, so I didn't really notice anything. Once again, I enjoyed the John and Troy having them back in my airwaves. That was one good thing about the Blackhawks being back last night. All right, last few notes from this game, Tony. Peter Mrazek gave him a chance once again. This is another running storyline here. 23 saves on 25 shots, maybe not the same volume that we've seen from in past games, but you got to respect the effort. And he also had a poke check that kind of made a little bit of a highlight reel there too. maybe it was a little bit sketchy at the end there, as the puck may have, it gets pushed a little bit further. Maybe it's going in around him and you're getting on the bad end of a highlight reel, but he was able to make that work. And it's just night in, night out. He had a little bit of a scare earlier when Marcus Foligno crashed into him earlier. And Tony, I feel like everybody, all Blackhawks fans, are holding their breath out of, you want Peter Mrazek to be all right, because we've seen Alex Stalock get bowled last season and be out for months with concussion issues. And then you didn't want to see Arvid Soderblom come into the game. That's for sure.
No, you didn't. I actually felt like, for all intents and purposes, the Hawks were in this one yesterday through the thick of it, which was impressive. But it starts to come back to that scene from The Departed. I'm the guy who does his job. You must be the other guy. That's Peter Mrazek and Arvid Soderblom. Mrazek has kept this team in so many hockey games that they probably shouldn't be in, especially with the litany of injuries that we've had, the terrible goaltending that we've seen from others. I'm surprised that we haven't sort of shuffled some stuff up. I haven't really looked recently at what's going down at the AHL level in terms of goaltending and who's riding what, but it's bad if Peter Mrazek goes down, man. Could you imagine a couple of weeks without him right now? It would just feel that much worse. It's not like we're winning games, like we're tanking effectively, but there needs to be some semblance of good things to watch just to keep you sane. And Peter Mrazek has been that all season.
Yep. Right. I think that's a perfect summation of it. And, it feels like we could apply this sort of discussion to so many games, especially ones before the break. Because now, Tony, with this next, most recent game, results turned in, Hawks have scored 11 goals in their last 11 games. That ain't going to get it done. And we know the source of this. It's injuries, especially Connor Bedard. And we'll talk about him a little bit more in a few minutes here. But last note from this one is Jason Dickinson. Charlie Muliotis saw him walking into the x-ray room after the game. Apparently he blocked a shot late. It was in his foot, Luke Richardson said, and he was just sore. But he misses practice today. And that it's like your other bright spot. Like, we were talking about him as a potential all-star replacement, right? So while Luke Richardson, you have to take him at his word for it right now, it's going to be telling if Jason Dickinson is out there for morning skate on Friday, right?
It is. And this is just not what you want to hear. I know that there was some talk about Dickinson missing practice too a couple days prior when we were coming back from the break. I believe he missed the first practice. I'm not sure exactly what that was all about.
Maintenance and
whatever. So he's probably pretty banged up at this point in time, Johnny. I would assume just the season at this juncture. So things are starting to wear on some guys. He's had to carry a lot of extra minutes this season.
Drawing the top matchups too. So
yeah. So I'm fine with him missing a game or a practice there. It's if we're starting to get into the game action stuff. Bedard, I know we'll talk about that in a second. When he comes back, it's going to be such a lift for everybody in this organization. But right now, he's one of those guys that you can sort of like count on to potentially give you some sort of offense in the Blackhawks forward group. And if he's down, it's just another one of these things, man. I've never seen anything like this in all of my hockey watching years. I've seen it on the baseball side right. with our beloved Chicago White Sox, Johnny, but not this with the Blackhawks.
Yep. So we'll have to see. Stay tuned at Four Feathers Pod on the socials. We'll let you know what Jason Dickinson's status is for Friday night's game. All right, Tony, we mentioned Connor Bedard. Let's talk about him. We have to. He appeared over this break at NHL All-Star Weekend, guest passer during the skills competition. Were you surprised to see him out there, or was this telegraphed?
This was telegraphed from a mile away, maybe even farther than that. The fact that Connor Bedard got injured, you knew he wasn't going to be playing in the All-Star game as soon as you heard the words fractured jaw. That was obviously something that Gary Bettman and the NHL wanted to include him in from a rating standpoint. That's very clear. There's a lot of things going on right now. I've seen some headlines about, Blackhawks overkill again, starting to take over the NHL. Sorry about it.
Get the salt shaker out.
Yeah, sorry about it. But Connor Bedard is the next star that this league wants to promote. So seeing him out at the All-Star game, doing some festivities, taking photos, suiting up on the ice, all the photo op stuff that he's able to do because he's progressed to that point in time. I'm sure doctors were involved in decisions to let him go out and do certain things that he was able to do. You wish it was full participant in the skills competition, but obviously the hardest shot stuff and different activities that were in those events probably eliminated him from a medical perspective. So I thought it was nice that the league got him out there, but Johnny, it felt just sort of like that tease. You know what I mean? Like it felt like you wanted more from Connor Bedard. You saw him on the bench there during these competitions, just sort of looking out, and you sort of feel for the guy because I think we all knew Connor McDavid was going to win this thing, but Bedard probably wanted to put on a show, and I felt bad that he couldn't participate. So it was almost, I think, in some ways good for Bedard to sit there and take that all in as a spectator very close to this stuff, to see the type of things that he's going to have to, do in his career and what this is all about. On the other end of that, like, I want to see the showcase as a Blackhawks fan, as a hockey fan. I want to watch Connor Bedard out there doing these things. And so I'm, tuned in for a little bit of this, and, seeing him there just sort of was like, man, I wish that he was fucking out there. Why can't we have nice things?
Right. Yep. I'm right there with you. I think it was, kind of telegraphed in the sense that Sherwood had mentioned that he was going to be at some events and doing some signing there. And then I think there was like a little bit of a hockey like demonstration camp sort of thing for kids that he was running up there as well. And then he also accepted his IHF Male Athlete of the Year award for his stellar showing previously in the World Juniors. So a litany of reasons for him to be there. Like you'd said, wish he would have been actually participating, especially in the skills competition, but it is what it is with the injury timeline. So, he made his appearance. NHL probably did the best they could, working him into anything that they could possibly get him on screen for there. So I think the biggest thing that'll come away from that is him sitting there and probably talking with Sidney Crosby and Nathan McKinnon for an extended period of time while the other guys were going during skills competition. You kind of saw some of those videos, images of that. And obviously Sidney Crosby being his favorite player, and you're learning from some of the best in the league. You could argue that Nathan McKinnon is the best player in the league this year. So that's probably beneficial for him as well. Like you said, kind of a future outlook standpoint there, what it takes to be a star. So, all right. He was part of another announcement, Tony. This was now #confirmed during the early game on Wednesday's TNT broadcast. Blackhawks will be having the Winter Classic at Wrigley Field in 2025. This was another thing that was kind of telegraphed from miles away, with Elliot Friedman reporting earlier in the month around the conclusion of this year's Winter Classic that the Hawks would be hosting it. They're running it back at Wrigley. Connor Bedard was out there on the field announcing this on TNT yesterday. Thoughts on the Hawks getting this again here?
I love it. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that think it's overkill. There's a lot of people out there who want to make an argument that the Hawks aren't ready to be on this stage. Those are all fine and dandy. Yes, the Hawks have played in a ton of Winter Classics, Stadium Series games, outdoor games, what have you. Yes, the Blackhawks are not a premier team in the league right now, and chances are they're probably not going to be a premier team in the league next season either. That's just sort of the writing on the wall. That said, I like the premier events for young Connor Bedard, Kevin Korchinski, Alex Vlasic, some of these younger guys, to get the spotlight on them, because guess what? At a certain point in time, this group is going to need to take the next step. They're going to need to play in front of heavy national audiences and in big games. And these are bonding moments for this team. If you're a Blackhawks fan, you should be excited that they get the opportunity to do this. It doesn't translate to immediate success at all. The Hawks have fared terribly in outdoor games. This is a different era, though. Who knows what's going to happen? The Blues, what their lineup is going to look like next year, is still out for debate, as well as the Blackhawks lineup. So I don't want to get into the game talk yet, but I think from just the sense of getting them, national stage games at this juncture in their careers is going to help grow them as a team. have more microscope on it. And guess what? It's good for the NHL. People don't want to hear it, but it is good for the NHL. All of the Chicago Blackhawks fans that are out there are going to tune into this game, which is going to help drive TV ratings. People are going to hate on it online, on Twitter. And guess what? Those impressions still count towards people talking about it. Makes it a newsworthy event, whether you like it or not. I love that we're at the center of it. It feels good to be part of an evil empire at certain points, Johnny, just because guess what? Most of my other teams aren't. So if people want to hate on the Blackhawks, by all means, bring it. Connor Bedard is here. He's not going anywhere anytime soon. And I expect more promotion for events and stuff. You saw what they already did with him at the All-Star game when he's injured. It's not going to stop the league from putting a product out there to target a specific audience because people like watching Connor Bedard play hockey. That's been the mantra of this entire season. If you look at TV ratings, if you look at all this stuff, it was a smart decision by the league. If people want to cry about it, they can cry about it. But, you got to do what's best for business here. And what's best for business is putting Connor Bedard on display.
Yep. I'm going to piggyback right off of that and say that this is the Connor Bedard show. He used their ratings driver, right? His debut in the NHL was the most viewed game of this regular season. And that is a departure from the norm because the Winter Classic historically, since its inception, has been the most viewed regular season game. So guess what? The NHL needs to compete with these other leagues. Football is only growing in popularity. Look at all the Taylor Swift stuff going on with the NFL. The college football playoff is expanding next year.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be more playoff teams in there and more events that they will also have to compete with here. We'll talk about the scheduling of that in a little bit here. This is the Connor Bedard show, just flat out. And I'm going to say, some people might argue this and say, oh, well, it's just Blackhawks favoritism. And they had the history of the dynasty of the 2010s and all of that playing into this decision here. Sure, that helps with the popularity and the eyeballs that you're going to get on this event. But I guarantee if the Columbus Blue Jackets had won the draft lottery last year, they would be trying to line up a game in Cincinnati or wherever, Cleveland, somewhere nearby. I don't know what Columbus people would prefer. Somewhere in there at one of those stadiums to get the Pittsburgh Penguins playing there, Sidney Crosby against Connor Bedard if he was the Blue Jackets. If the San Jose Sharks won the NHL draft lottery last year, they would be clearing out Levi Stadium or not Candlestick, Oracle Park out there in San Francisco and getting that thing ready for a California team's game involving Connor Bedard with the San Jose Sharks. That's just is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So he's on the Blackhawks. They're going to get the event. Accept it. That's the rationale. That's the reasoning behind it here. I'll just leave it at that. You brought up all the other good points about it. I don't need to hammer those home anymore, but I just wanted to say my piece on that because I truly, genuinely believe that that would have been the case. And it just so happens to be that he's on the Blackhawks. So let's talk a few, kind of details about this one. Skokes brought up a good point in the comments here. We'll get to that in a second, but venues at Wrigley Field, we know that they're running it back. They're not going with a new venue. Obviously NFL season still in play there. So Soldier Field probably was not on the table there, Tony. With this, there's no date set here. Obviously, baseball stadiums open all, winters, so they could do it whenever they really wanted to. But think about what they're competing with. Like we just talked about those ratings being so important. I'd mentioned the college football playoff expanding next year. Well, guess what? On New Year's Day next year, the Peach Bowl, the Rose Bowl, and the Sugar Bowl, all quarterfinal games for the expanded 12-team college football playoff will be taking place on New Year's Day. It's not just your standard New Year's Six bowls that used to just include the Rose Bowl and then the other ones that happened earlier on in the day. So competing with that, don't know if this moves it to New Year's Eve because there's only one quarterfinal game. That's a possibility.
Could you see it under the lights on New Year's Eve?
Doubt it, because that'll still be prime Rose Bowl. They're not going. The Rose Bowl stays at its time, and you would be conflicting with the end of that, which I guarantee more people will be watching that than the NHL. I mean, just look at this last year. This happened before that Rose Bowl, which was a semifinal game for the college football playoff this year, and you saw what the ratings happened. Granted, fanfare around it, Seattle, West Coast market, Vegas. We would hope that the Stanley Cup champions could drive a little bit more, but fact of the matter is people were tuning in to watch Michigan and Alabama, not the Seattle Kraken and Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, true. And I'm not a big college football guy, Johnny. So, pardon me if I don't know exactly what all the bowls are and where they line up on TV scheduling, but it's football. It drives massive viewership. You bring up a good point here. You might see a little bit of a shift in terms of when
There,
they play this game? What do you think it's going to
yep.
be?
I think New Year's Eve could be a target. They've also done it on January 2nd. If you remember when the last time the Blackhawks and Blues played a Winter Classic at Busch Stadium, it was on January 2nd. I
Yep.
forget exactly what the kind of conflict was at that
I
time.
believe
or
it was
whatever,
over a
but
weekend too, and they played it on a Sunday. Correct?
that's a good. I'd have to pull up a 2017 calendar
I'd
to
have
get
to. I'd
the
have to as well.
exact one on that. But just so you know, there's no set date. So while it's standard that it happens on New Year's Day, that's not set in stone. The date and time will be announced at a later date. All right, Skokes brings up a point here. He says, "Love the Hawks getting it. Just didn't want to see the Blues again. Give us someone different." I think they're playing into the Cubs Cardinals rivalry here with this game being at Wrigley Field. So I understand that. Kind of made sense logically from that standpoint. Would you have liked to see another opponent in this instead of the Blues?
I like this rivalry setup in terms of Winter Classic matchups. Obviously, you've seen the Detroit Red Wings, you've seen the St. Louis Blues in these events already. You had the sort of added aspect here, and I think that what they're pitching for is the rivalry between the St. Louis Cardinals and the Chicago Cubs in this matchup, bringing a St. Louis team into Wrigley Field. They've already brought Detroit in to Wrigley. This would sort of add a little bit of an option for St. Louis fans who want to come up and watch their team play in a matchup here. So I get why you would extend the offer, I guess, to the other team, being St. Louis in this scenario. Would I rather see anybody else? That's an interesting question. I sort of would like the Nashville Predators, if I'm being honest, just because I don't like them a lot, and I feel like it's time to beat them in some other, penultimate type event. That said, it's gonna suck no matter what. If the Hawks lose, I feel like it would suck more for me as a fan if they lost to Nashville. Then again, it's gonna be in Wrigley Field. We'll touch on that again in a second, but I really feel like they're playing towards that Chicago St. Louis rivalry with this, just from a rating standpoint. I don't know if Nashville has the national attention that you would get versus a franchise like St. Louis and sort of the history behind that and what you're trying to draw out from an audience perspective. Other teams that I could see, we've already done stuff with Pittsburgh. I believe that was the Soldier Field game. You mentioned bringing Sidney Crosby in against Connor Bedard and them, that relationship that's there. I could see where that would be an option. But if you're trying to bring in like the biggest ratings factor, the New York Rangers come to mind.
Yep, you read my mind. I was gonna bring that up. I feel like that maybe was not on the table with this kind of showcase that they're doing outdoors at MetLife Stadium with those metro area teams being involved there. That being the Devils, Flyers, Islanders, and the Rangers. There, one could argue that if you wanted to, go original six and draw on the Canadian viewership, the Montreal Canadiens. However, there's no real baseball connection there. I feel like when they played at a baseball field, they'd like to have some sort of, connect on that front. So those are the only ones I can think of. Other than that, what Dallas Stars, but they had it in 2020. They hosted at the Cotton Bowl down there. So it is what it is. I feel like it being at Wrigley Field kind of dictated that it had to be one of the teams with the baseball connection. And for the home team that plays there 160 or 81 times a year, it's the St. Louis connection. So that just is what it is. Good point though, Skokes. I think it's fair criticism of it if you're going to have something to say about the event. So we'll get a little bit more on Wrigley Field a little bit later, Tony. But let's talk the reason for Blackhawks getting this. Connor Bedard, when's he coming back? I feel like we discuss this every time here. Luke Richardson has been adamant, sticking to that initial timeline of 6 to 8 weeks. He says as much as Connor Bedard wants it to be earlier, it's probably still going to be no earlier than the 6-week mark of his recovery timeline. So now we are amidst this stretch here where it's 2 to 4 weeks away, Tony, from that. And his doctor's appointments are on Monday. So take that from earlier this Monday was probably his last check-in. We're in the middle of this week here on February 8th talking about this. We'll get another check-in next week. And that should probably be the second to last one before our predicted dates come into play, Tony. And if I'm right, and that doctor's appointment goes well in 2 weeks, I think that game against the Philadelphia Flyers on that Wednesday, 21st, is very, very good, possibility, especially leading into the weekend that will culminate with Chris Chelios's jersey retirement ceremony, which was your prediction.
Yeah, and you're Nostradani on this stuff, so I really trust your judgment. I would say that hopefully, and it's not that I want him to come back later and make a triumphant return in this game. I'd like to see him on the ice as soon as possible, just for my fucking sanity, and I'm sure your fucking sanity and everybody else's sanity that watches Chicago Blackhawks hockey. The sooner he gets back, the better. But the one thing that we don't want is any sort of re-injuries, any sort of stuff. But I want him to get back out there, knock the rust off, and put on a show in that game against Detroit. So the sooner he's back, the sooner that can happen. I did see that note about the doctor's appointments being on Mondays. That is the first one, though, where he's in that return window. We have seen players held back like a week just out of extraordinary precaution. But I would say I know it's a heavy home schedule this season. I would say he's getting close to the point where if we were on the road, he'd be traveling with the team, potentially just getting back in game routine within a week here, even if he's not fully cleared yet. We've seen that before in the past, or they stay back and sort of keep training at Fifth Third Ice Arena. But I mean, he's right around the corner. He looked good at the NHL All-Star break. I was surprised by that. It didn't seem super severe for somebody that just underwent surgery and is coming back from these things. You remember Jared Tenorti had that broken jaw last year, and it just you could tell, right? Like you could tell that there was something going on with his face. Bedard looks like he was very lucky in this incident and was able to talk and do all these other things. So, you're happy that he just didn't have to have his mouth wired shut for an extended period of time and, sipping, milkshakes for 6 weeks and then having to do all this recovery. So, it seems like we've avoided the worst case scenario, which was missing the rest of the season. I'm just thankful we're going to be seeing Connor Bedard grace the ice at the United Center again fairly soon.
Right. It's a good roundup. Only thing I'll add is that with it not, a lot of times when you talk about guys possibly being, held back a little bit to get them in the rhythm, a lot of that comes with skating, conditioning. He's been able to do all of that, right? Because it was like just a week after that he had the procedure that he was back actually skating, obviously not at full go and with restrictions, wearing the bubble, not being able to take slap shots. Well, guess what? He's progressing in those areas as well. Seems like he can clench a little bit more as he was taking some slap shots per the video provided by Ben Pope, Charlie Miliotis, Tracy Myers, all of them taking him in skating in a non-contact capacity. And then he's also now joined the actual team drills that are non-contact ones in terms of, rushes or any offensive drills that they may have where there's no chance of him, getting hit out there and still wearing the bubble to protect that jaw. But that means, in my mind, the conditioning is going to be there and it will quite literally just be a matter of are the bones settled, which Luke Richardson has referenced. And God, I feel for this as much as I do Connor Bedard. You don't want anyone to get injured in the game, but it happens as it's part of the game. And he's, looks like he's young and resilient and pushing through it right in his recovery. I feel bad for Luke Richardson having to answer the same damn questions every day in a new way. That's who I feel bad for in this situation. And I know the reporters are just doing their job. They're getting the people the answers that they want because we're all wondering. We sit here on this show weekly and talk about when's Connor Bedard coming back. But I wonder if Luke Richardson by the end of this is going to pull out some jokes on the reporters. I think that'd be pretty funny.
He seems like the type of guy to do so. But this is getting down to the point where, you start to run out of creative ways to answer the same question over and over again. We'll see what Richardson can pull out of his hat here.
Yeah,
he can make this pretty fun.
Yeah, he brought up the other one, like you're talking about, how far along Connor Bedard is. He said, "Oh yeah, I don't know if he's eating like a mouthful of like nuts or anything like yet." So I feel like we're getting to the stage. Luke Richardson's reaching his breaking point on some of these, and not he'll gladly answer the questions, but like I said, it's over and over and over. It's like Groundhog Day, right? That just passed.
I'm sure it's not just reporters asking him too.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's got family members, friends. When's Connor coming back? When's Connor coming back? That's probably the most asked question to Luke Richardson at this point is when is Connor coming back? Well, when he's #back, I'm sure Mr. Richardson will be a very happy man.
Yeah. All right. Other injury updates on this front. We had talked about Jason Dickinson. I think, that blocking the shot late in Wednesday's game. We'll have to see Friday morning. So check the Four Feathers pod account for updates on that front. Other than that, Anthony Beauvillier seems to be the only other one that's making some strides recovery wise that we can actually physically see. He was out on the ice in non-contact capacity, skating with that side group, which included Connor Bedard. Initially had a brace on his left wrist. I think he broke it clean, to be honest with you, in that game at Nashville when I watched the replay of that hit. But that seems to be off as he was doing a little more passing and shooting today. So that may be a return around the corner here. Other than that, do you buy it or not? Luke Richardson says Andreas Athanasiou is expected to start skating soon. This is now going on 3 months, almost to the day that he's been sidelined. And it was revealed in mid-January that he had a groin procedure a little while back, worked with the doctors that helped him through some of that in back when he was with LA. Are we actually going to see him or what?
He's a huge mystery, man. Like, I don't understand this. We were very clear about what happened to Connor Bedard. We were very clear about what happened with Taylor Hall. We've been very clear on specific injuries. And then there's other guys, it feels like, Johnny, that like we just don't know anything. And we're not told how, why, what, where. Andreas Athanasiou is one of those guys. I was beginning to think that he was just done for the season and they didn't want to say anything. Who knows? I can't buy that he's going to start skating and then make a return by the end of the season. What did he say? A couple weeks from now, that he was going to start skating again. That could mean
the most recent update, and once again, vague. The most recent update, I believe it was Tuesday, was soon.
Soon. Okay, so soon could be a week. It could be 2 weeks.
Right.
How much longer do you need? Mid-March return? Does that make any sense for him coming back? I feel like it's sort of past the point of no return.
You bring up a good point, because I wonder about him, a guy who has had issues with the same area in the past and relies on speed as a major part of his game. We know this guy can fly when he's right. He's one of the fastest. Yeah. He's probably the fastest skater on the team, one of the fastest in the league. Does this affect, like, is this going to like cook his style of game, having this, a lingering, nagging injury? Then on the other flip side of that, we've seen a guy, obviously different position, but Peter Mrazek, we thought groin issues would be a lingering thing here, and he's been able to stay mostly healthy this year. I just don't know, and I think you pose a good question, that is it even feasible for him to be back? And if he does come back at some point in like mid-March, is it worth it for him, jeopardizing potential future of his career here? I don't know.
I don't know. What's his contract at right now?
He's got one more year because he signed a 2-year deal prior to the season.
So, I mean, at this point, like, we're just sitting here, two dudes on a podcast, Johnny, but why not just shut him down for the season, let him strength and condition, train his way back, and then, boom, it's next year you go in to, training camp, particularly healthy, and, yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious where we stand at this point in time and in the standings. What is the reason to bring him back? I don't know.
I don't know. We'll have to see if that soon even comes to fruition. I feel it's not as long running, but I feel like we're getting the Alonzo Ball treatment here on
Sort
this
of,
front.
yeah.
This is the Lonzo Ball version of the Blackhawks, at least in a condensed form here. So our guy Stolip Breezen had a good comment there. He says, happy to not see you this season. Clearly, it's a significant injury. Hasn't healed for some time. Nothing to gain this season to come back. So next season he comes back like Blackwell. Still at Breezing ads. Thank you for the comments. Appreciate that. Feel like that's a realistic outlook, but we'll see. Once again, stay updated on the X/Twitter at Four Feathers Pod with us over there. All right, Tyler Johnson's back. That's the only other one. Looks good. Sounds like he broke a few bones in his foot back on New Year's Eve. Missed a little over a month, so I'm sure that break was helpful for him getting back in the mix. All righty, Tony, time for one of our favorite segments, and it's Ruffle Some Feathers. And you had said we were going to circle back on Wrigley Field. I'm going to circle back on Wrigley Field here. The physical layout of Wrigley Field is terrible for hockey, and I would not pay to go to the Winter Classic because I'm not paying for the prime seats that are going to get you the best view of the ice there. I know they do have video boards now, so that will probably make it a little bit better for the in-stadium experience. But even if you've ever been to a baseball game, sitting up along that like third base or first base, way back in there, like tucked under the concourse there, not a great view. You've got poles, the stanchions in the way. If you're out in the bleachers, I'm sure that atmosphere in terms of experience would be excellent. But once again, you're looking over boards. You've got the logos that are going to be on the field, and it's going to be tough to see exactly what the hell's going on there. And you're having a worse view of the video boards from there. I wouldn't pay to go to Wrigley Field. What I would do is go to the bars around there, be part of the game day atmosphere there. And I feel like that's very kind of Cub-like, in true Cubs fashion there, not actually go to the game, but be part of the atmosphere there. But that's fine. Maybe I'll piss off some people, but Wrigley Field is, it's historic. I'll give it that. But other than that,
there's been a lot of discourse on Wrigley Field on the podcasts I've been on this past week. I know that Matt Crawford over in White Sox Twitter is a big Wrigley Field guy. But I'm not a big Wrigley Field guy, Johnny. I've been there once for a corporate event. I lasted about 5 innings there, and I exited the ballpark early. Did not enjoy my time there very much. That said, I've got a decision to make when it comes to Winter Classic next season. I did not go to any of the outdoor games. I've never been to an outdoor hockey game. I've got to sort of check off a ballpark. One of my goals is to, hit every ballpark. I'd like it to be like, hey, the only time I had to step foot in that building, because I can just erase the corporate event. We'll just forget that happened. And I can mark down in my memory book, hey, I got to see the Blackhawks play hockey there, and I can check that off the ballpark list and then just sort of move on from there. I feel like it washes away the stains that were there before. So I've got a decision to make. I think I might try and attend. We'll see. It's sort of an ongoing battle process. I wish that this event was held elsewhere. I'm with you on this one. I understand why they're doing it. I understand that even our guy, Pat Kaminsky, wrote about this at ontapsportsnet.com. The top 5 options. I sort of liked the Lambeau Field option. I liked a potential guaranteed rate Comiskey Park option. I thought it would have been cool to do some tailgating as we do before Sox games normally, Johnny, out there before a Hawks game would have been really fun. Getting to Wrigley Field is a pain in the ass. Trying to bring myself into that stadium is difficult. I feel like the Blackhawks being there would be a reason for me to go. Because I really don't want to frequent that place at all for really any other reason. So trying to give myself, just the opposite side of the coin here. I don't know if I want to be running around Wrigleyville bars per se, but I can see where that would be a good experience as well, especially for a lot of people out there, the game day atmosphere without actually having to step foot in the stadium and, have a shitty view for a couple of hours in the freezing cold, which is not inherently fun as it is. But these things don't come around very often. Yep. Although I do feel
a novelty
that
of it, right?
It's a novelty thing, and you got to kind of pick and choose when you go and do it. There's part of me that thinks, how much longer are they going to run this event if it doesn't include the Blackhawks and Connor Bedard for all the reasons that we just talked about with the TV ratings and all of these other things that are going on. I've liked this idea since they, originally debuted it. I'm hoping that they come out with a cool jersey for it. Maybe bring back the original one that they played in at Wrigley Field. I think that would be sweet. That's
They're going to do a new one. They need to.
Yeah, I know they always do a new one, but it is what it is. I've got a decision to make on this one, and maybe I'll be swayed in one way or the other as it approaches. But I totally understand your sentiments here.
Yeah, like I said, the physical just view of it. I don't know, man. It's it's tough sledding for unless you have the perfect, and depends on the orientation of the rink. I would imagine it's going to be similar as it was in the past. But once again, those best view tickets will be gobbled up early and then resold for an extremely high price. So that is what it is. All right, let's get on to Salt Shaker. Also pertains to the Winter Classic. Go and check the replies to any social media post about it and any other fan base that's crying about the Blackhawks getting another Winter Classic, playing in another outdoor game, having Connor Bedard. They are all the saltiest. Pour it on them. Pour it on them. That's what it's for. That's what that edit of Connor Bedard that we have is for. I didn't really go and scope any specific ones out, Tony, but there's plenty of vitriol being thrown towards the Blackhawks and Connor Bedard saying, oh, well, he doesn't actually want to play there. He wants to be in Vancouver. I think it's hilarious that those people are still holding on.
How are we still on this?
Because he's from there. That is quite literally the only reason that they're holding on to it. So that's the Salt Shaker for this week. I feel like we can pull up ones like this every week, but with the Winter Classic news, all the people detesting the Blackhawks, once again, for getting it, you are the recipient of our Salt Shaker. All righty. Let's take a look at what's on tap next, Tony. A couple of games coming up here. Homestand continues Friday against the Rangers, 7:30 on NBC Sports Chicago. Nice original 6 matchup to kick off the weekend. And then on Tuesday, they'll have Vancouver, another top team here, coming in 7:30 on NBC Sports Chicago as well. Tough stretch of games here. These opponents are both, near the top of the league here. It's going to be... I mean, we just saw, can't really get much going against teams that are middling in the Minnesota Wild, the Calgary Flames before break, the Seattle Kraken. Now you're playing cream of the crop.
We've done predictions on this show so many times, and lately it's been not good predictions. It is absolutely pouring, and I'm getting a ton of thunder over here, Johnny. I don't know about you. That just was not something I expected in the middle of February. Looking at this Rangers, Vancouver, I don't see a way out of this with a victory.
Nope. I'm going to go 0-2. I don't think they get a point either. I don't think they take either of these teams to overtime. Might be looking at a little bit more competitive. I expect them to have more than one shot in the first period versus the Rangers. I'll say that. I feel like they can penetrate that a little bit better because the Rangers aren't an especially excellent defensively structured team. I know they got some big bodies and Trouba on the back end there. However, I expect Luke Richardson to have the boys a little bit more ready to go. And he said that it doesn't affect them really, but maybe that 8:52 puck drop resulted in a little bit of a slow start coming back from break. That was a little bit weird on Wednesday.
Random timing.
Expect a little bit, but at the end of the game, when the final horn sounds, the results are going to be the same. It's going to be losses, and it's going to be a low goal total by the Blackhawks. I'm just hoping for 2 goals in one game, Tony.
Hey, 2 goals in one game, that would be a great start. I just feel that it's not really going to happen until either we get extremely lucky or Connor Bedard is back, because that's, we use the term straw that stirs the drink on the White Sox side a lot. I know on Sox on Tap, but Connor Bedard at this point is the straw that stirs the Blackhawks drink on offense. It really is. And if you're without Jason Dickinson, you're without a lot of these offensive weapons, I don't know where it's coming from. I really don't know where it's coming from. You need a lot of luck. In order to get pucks in the back of the net.
Our guy Ron Luce is not on the show, but I'll call back to something that he said during our midseason assessment. This would be a great time for the likes of Taylor Radish, his most biggest disappointment of the first 50 games, to step up. This would be a good time for Philip Kershev to step up, and I'll give him credit. He had a nice rush to the net, and he did set up that Foligno goal, but potting a few more of them too, and maybe just some puck luck too. Hockey gods, give us a bounce or two, maybe something from the point, something that pinballs around, as Eddie O would say.
Wouldn't it just be nice to celebrate a win or two here in February? Just a couple, because it feels like we've really paid the price.
Right.
I know that
Yeah.
we want to secure that number 1 pick, but just give us a couple wins along the way, please.
Yeah, we're almost out of time here on this episode of the Four Feathers podcast. Appreciate everyone tuning in. My last question will be then, since we kind of already gave our predictions, expecting some losses here over these next 2. Will the Blackhawks win a game before Connor Bedard returns?
That's really tough. That's really tough to answer. You could probably place a little bet on no here. I'm gonna say that answer may be no, Johnny. And I hope that's not the case. I hope I'm gonna be in attendance on Friday night. I'm gonna be rooting for them to win. And hopefully they do. But Rangers, Vancouver. What's on the schedule after that?
Ottawa is probably your best looking shot right now. Because after that, that's when the Connor Bedard return window opens up, at least at that 6-week mark.
Yeah, so you've only got a couple more matchups before you're in that window for him to get back here. It's insanely possible that they don't win another game until he's back.
Right. The other one in there, Penguins. They're also a team that could possibly be one. They're not as dominant as the likes of New York and Vancouver so far this year. So we'll see what happens. That's about all we've got for this episode. We appreciate everyone tuning in, jumping in the comments here. You can go and do that by subscribing on Tap Sportsnet on YouTube. Like us over on Facebook. And as always, visit ontapsportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports, literature, and podcasting needs. You can find us on the socials at Four Feathers Pod, at OnTap Sportsnet. All righty, Tony. That'll do it for this edition. Until next time, let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks.